Here's something most men don't realize until they've already lost their power in a relationship. The man she respects the most is rarely the one who begs her to stay. It's the one who is strong enough to walk away when he knows his value. Most men believe love is about holding on no matter what. They think that if they keep showing loyalty, patience, and endless effort, eventually the woman will recognize how much they care. So when problems start appearing, when she becomes distant, or when the respect begins to fade, they double their effort. They try harder, give more attention, send longer messages, and fight to keep the connection alive. But something important often gets lost in that process: self respect. When a man is willing to accept poor treatment just to avoid losing someone, he slowly communicates something without realizing it. He communicates that he is afraid to lose her. He communicates that her presence in his life is more important than his own standards. And when that message is sent repeatedly through actions, the balance in the relationship begins to shift. Respect begins to fade. This doesn't happen because someone intentionally wants to disrespect you. It happens because human nature tends to test boundaries. If a person sees that no matter what they do, you will always stay, always forgive, and always chase them back, they subconsciously begin to see you as someone who will tolerate anything just to keep them. And the moment someone believes you will tolerate anything, your value in their eyes quietly decreases. But the dynamic changes completely when a man understands the power of walking away. Walking away is not about anger, it's not about punishing someone, and it's not about trying to manipulate their emotions. Walking away is simply the act of protecting your self respect. It's the moment you decide that your standards matter more than your fear of losing someone. When a man calmly steps back from a situation where he is not being appreciated, something powerful happens. He shows that his time, energy, and attention are valuable. He shows that he is not dependent on one person for his happiness. And most importantly, he shows that he respects himself enough to leave when the situation no longer aligns with his values. That kind of confidence is incredibly rare, and because it is rare, it immediately stands out. The man who walks away does not look desperate. He does not look needy. He looks strong, composed, and emotionally grounded. His actions communicate that he knows what he deserves and he refuses to accept less. That level of self respect naturally commands attention and respect from others, because when someone realizes that you are willing to leave rather than settle for less than you deserve, they begin to see you differently. Your presence is no longer taken for granted, your attention is no longer guaranteed, and suddenly the man who walked away becomes the one she starts thinking about the most. Because the moment you choose self respect over fear is the moment your true value becomes impossible to ignore. One of the most powerful forces that influences attraction is something very simple: scarcity. Human nature has always valued things that are limited, rare, or difficult to keep. The moment something feels guaranteed and always available, people slowly stop paying attention to it the same way they once did. This pattern appears in many areas of life, but it becomes especially clear in relationships. When a man is constantly present, constantly texting, constantly checking in, and constantly giving attention without limits, his presence slowly becomes normal. The attention that once felt special starts to feel routine. The effort that once felt exciting becomes something expected. And when something becomes expected, people rarely stop to think about what it would feel like if it suddenly disappeared. This is why the dynamic often changes the moment a man walks away. When someone who was always there suddenly becomes unavailable, it creates a shift in perception. The same attention that once felt ordinary now becomes scarce. The presence that once filled everyday moments is no longer part of the routine, and the human mind reacts strongly to that kind of change. Instead of taking the attention for granted, the person who once had easy access to it begins to notice the silence. They begin noticing the space where the interaction used to exist. The familiar messages stop coming. The predictable conversations disappear. That absence naturally creates curiosity. Curiosity begins with simple questions. Why did he stop reaching out? Why isn't he reacting the way he used to? Did something change in his life? Is he moving forward without me? Is there someone else now receiving the attention that used to be mine? These questions start circulating in the mind because the pattern has been broken. Before, everything was predictable. She knew that if she pulled away a little, you would come closer. If she became distant, you would try harder. Your attention was reliable and constant. But when you walk away, that certainty disappears. Now the situation feels different. The person who once seemed fully invested is no longer chasing. The attention that once flowed freely is now gone. And the mind naturally tries to understand what caused that shift. This is where scarcity begins to change the emotional dynamic. The more something feels limited, the more valuable it appears. When attention is no longer guaranteed, it suddenly becomes something worth noticing again. Instead of being one of many things she receives during the day, your presence becomes something that is missing. And when something meaningful goes missing, the mind begins to focus on it. This is why the man who walks away often becomes the man who's remembered the most, not because he tried harder to impress someone, but because his absence created space for curiosity and reflection. Because the moment your presence becomes rare is the moment it starts becoming valuable again. There is a major difference between emotional strength and emotional dependence, and that difference quietly shapes how attraction grows or fades in a relationship. Many men believe that showing strong feelings, constant attention, and endless effort will make them more attractive. They think that the more emotionally invested they appear, the more the other person will appreciate their dedication. But attraction rarely responds to emotional dependence. When a man becomes overly dependent on someone for his happiness, his behavior begins to change in subtle ways. He starts seeking reassurance more often. He becomes more sensitive to every small shift in tone or mood. If she replies a little later than usual, he wonders what went wrong. If she seems distant, he feels the need to fix the situation immediately. Over time, his emotional state begins to revolve around her reactions, and while that may feel like love from his perspective, it can slowly create pressure on the other side because when someone feels responsible for another person's emotional stability, the connection begins to feel heavy instead of exciting. Emotional strength looks very different. A man who is emotionally strong still cares about the relationship, but his sense of identity does not depend on it. His mood is not controlled by whether a message arrives quickly or slowly. His confidence does not collapse when someone pulls away for a while. Instead, he remains steady, calm, and focused on his own life. This kind of emotional independence creates a completely different energy. When a man is emotionally grounded, he doesn't chase validation. He doesn't constantly try to prove his worth or demand attention. He simply shows up as himself, confident in who he is and comfortable with the possibility that not every connection is meant to last forever. And that kind of mindset is incredibly attractive because it communicates something powerful without saying a word. It shows that this man is not desperate for approval. It shows that he has a life that continues moving forward, whether someone chooses to be part of it or not. When a woman senses that kind of emotional strength, it naturally builds respect. She sees that this man is capable of standing on his own, making his own decisions, and maintaining his inner balance even during uncertainty. That stability creates safety and intrigue at the same time. It tells her that he is not easily shaken by temporary emotions or external circumstances. It shows that he values himself and not to beg for attention or try to control someone else's feelings. And when a man reaches the point where he is willing to walk away rather than become emotionally dependent, his presence begins to carry a different weight. He is no longer trying to hold the connection together through effort alone. Instead, he allows the connection to exist only if it is mutual and genuine, because the truth is simple. Strength attracts while dependence slowly pushes people away. One of the biggest reasons people begin taking someone for granted is because they become completely predictable. When a person knows exactly how you will react in every situation, your behavior slowly loses its impact. There is no mystery, no uncertainty, and no real consequences for their actions because they already know what you will do next. This pattern shows up in many relationships without people realizing it. When a man is deeply invested in someone, he often becomes extremely predictable. If she pulls away a little, he immediately moves closer. If she takes longer to reply, he sends another message. If she becomes distant, he tries harder to reconnect. His actions are driven by the fear of losing the relationship, so his response is always to stay, chase, and fix. At first, this effort might seem admirable, but over time, it creates a pattern that becomes easy to read. She begins to understand that no matter what happens, he will always remain there trying to make things work. Even if she becomes inconsistent, even if she gives less effort, even if she creates emotional distance, she knows that he will eventually come back and try again. And when someone becomes that predictable, their presence slowly loses its sense of importance. Not because they are not valuable, but because their value no longer feels at risk. If something feels guaranteed, the human mind stops paying close attention to it. This is where the power of walking away completely disrupts the pattern. When the man who is always there suddenly decides to step back, the predictable routine disappears. The reactions she expected no longer happen. The messages stop coming. The emotional chasing that once followed every moment of distance is gone. Now the situation feels unfamiliar. Instead of knowing exactly what will happen next, she begins to experience uncertainty. The man who once seemed completely invested is no longer behaving the same way. The pattern she relied on has been broken, and that break in predictability forces attention. Now she begins to think about the situation differently. Why did he stop reacting? Why isn't he trying to fix things like before? Did something change in the way he sees me? Did I push him too far? These questions arise because the usual pattern no longer exists. When someone realizes that your presence is not guaranteed, they start noticing it again. The same attention that once felt automatic now feels uncertain, and uncertainty naturally creates focus. Walking away shows that your time and energy are not something people can endlessly rely on without giving something back in return. It shows that your presence is conditional on mutual respect and effort. That realization changes the dynamic because when the predictable pattern disappears, the person who once expected you to stay suddenly realizes that you might not come back this time. And sometimes that realization is exactly what makes them start paying attention again. One of the biggest reasons people fail to recognize someone's true value is simple familiarity. When a person is constantly present in your life, their presence slowly becomes part of the background. The things they do for you, the support they give, the conversations you share, over time, these things can start to feel normal instead of special. This is not always intentional. It's just how human nature works. When someone is always there, always available, always willing to give their time and energy, it becomes easy to assume they will continue being there no matter what happens. Their presence becomes part of the routine of everyday life, and routines rarely make people stop and reflect. When you see the same person every day, hear from them constantly, and receive their attention without effort, you stop noticing the small things that once made the connection meaningful. The value is still there, but it becomes invisible because it is always available. But everything changes the moment that presence disappears. When a man walks away and truly removes himself from the situation, the routine suddenly breaks. The messages that used to arrive no longer appear. The voice that used to respond is quiet. The energy that once filled certain moments of the day is no longer there. At first, the silence may not seem significant. People often assume it's temporary. They think things will return to normal soon. But as time passes and that presence continues to be absent, something important begins to happen. The mind starts filling the empty space with memories. Instead of focusing on the small frustrations that once existed, the person begins remembering the positive moments, the conversations that made them laugh, the support they received during difficult times. The stability and attention that once felt ordinary suddenly begins to feel rare. Distance changes perspective. When two people are constantly interacting, small problems can feel larger than they actually are. Emotions run high, misunderstandings happen, and people can become focused on temporary frustrations. But when space is introduced, those emotions calm down. And when emotions calm down, clarity often appears. Now she begins to look back at the relationship with a different mindset. She starts seeing the things she may not have fully appreciated before, the effort you made, the consistency you showed, the presence you provided in her life. The value that once blended the background begins to stand out. This is why absence can sometimes create realization, not because you try to convince someone of your importance, but because your absence gave them the opportunity to experience what life feels like without you in it. And when someone finally understands the value of what they lost, that realization can become very powerful. Because sometimes the only way for someone to see your worth clearly is to experience the space you once filled. There is a certain kind of confidence that changes the way people see you. And it comes from knowing that your life will move forward no matter what happens in any single relationship. The man who truly understands this does not chase, beg, or hold on out of fear. He understands that connection should be mutual. And if someone chooses to walk away, his life does not collapse around that decision. This mindset creates a powerful difference in the way he behaves. Many men chase because they believe the person they are losing is their only chance at happiness. They believe that if this one relationship ends, everything important disappears with it. That belief creates fear, and fear drives desperate behavior. They begin trying to fix everything, convince the other person to stay, or prove their worth in ways that slowly reduce their confidence. But the man who knows he has options thinks very differently. Having options does not necessarily mean having multiple romantic partners waiting in the background. It means having a full life. It means having goals, ambitions, friendships, personal growth, and a clear sense of direction that does not depend on one person's approval. When a man builds a life like that, he stops approaching relationships from a place of scarcity. Scarcity says, if I lose this person, I lose everything. Abundance says, I would enjoy sharing my life with someone, but my life already has meaning and direction. That shift in mindset completely changes the energy he brings into a relationship. He is no longer trying to impress someone in order to earn their validation. He is not constantly worried about saying the perfect thing or doing the perfect action to keep someone interested. Instead, he simply shows up as himself, confident in the knowledge that the right person will appreciate him for who he is. And that kind of confidence is incredibly attractive. When a woman senses that a man is not afraid of losing her, she begins to see him differently, not because he is careless, but because he is emotionally secure. His calm attitude shows that he values connection, but he also values himself enough not to compromise his dignity out of fear. This is why the man who walks away often becomes the man who stands out the most. He shows through his actions that his life continues moving forward. He does not chase someone who is unsure about him. He does not compete for attention where respect is missing. Instead, he invests his time and energy where it is welcomed and appreciated. And when someone realizes that the man they walked away from is not standing still waiting for them, but instead building a strong and fulfilling life, it can completely change the way they see him, because the man who knows his life is full of opportunities never needs to chase someone who is unsure about staying. And that confidence is exactly what makes him impossible to ignore